Along part two, we're going to investigate this code a little bit more in depth and understand some of the things that are going on. One thing I wanted to point out in VS Code is that you can change your color theme. So up here under code and then preferences, you can pick different color themes. So I prefer to code in a dark theme, but some people like light themes, meaning that all the colors are light. The same thing goes for Slack. You can change your color themes as one of your settings. So let's switch it back to dark. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is going to help you see this code a little bit more in depth. So now when I launch my live server, um, I have, some basic elements. I have to swap out my image in the back, but I can't really tell, like, where does my header end? I explained box model last class and that there are kind of invisible boxes behind all of these things, but what does that mean? Can I actually see that? So yes, you can see it two ways actually, and you can see which way works better for you. So the first way you can see it is by putting a command in here at the very, very top of the code. And that command is border style dashed. So what that does, and again, this makes it a little hard to look at, is that puts a dashed line on every single element that's on the page. So this asterisk that you see at the start of your code, that means do this to every single thing on the page. Do it to every element on the page. So we're overriding some features of padding and margin, and then we're putting that border style. This border box helps with some issues that CSS has. So now I can see everything. So if I need to see, okay, I want to move this whole section over to the left, I can now see, okay, I must have some sort of setting in here for like margin, like, I don't know, 30 pixels, something like that. So let's see, if I come over here now, I can see that my name has a margin left 30 pixels. If I do a command slash, I can turn that little snippet of code off and see how it just moved over 30 pixels. So this turning on your border is a great way to help you debug your code. Like if you've been asking yourself, like, I need to move my name over. Why is my name not moving over? What's happening here? That can offer you enough clues that then you can go into your code and start to debug a little bit. Another way you can see this is with developer tools in Chrome. So if you go up to, where is it? View, and then developer. If you don't have developer tools, or if you're using a different web browser, every web browser has its own version. It works slightly different. There are plugins that you can install, but I'm pretty sure that most of you will have it active. So you go to View, Developer, and then you go over to Developer Tools. So this is a resource that web developers use pretty frequently. It gives all kinds of information about your document. It shows different pieces of your document. And the nice thing too is that you can come over here and go to View, Developer, Inspect Elements. And now when you hover over different parts of your image, it tells you exactly what that is. So if you're not sure, what div with the class of front side, like what you called that or what the image is, you can come over here and hover over those areas and it will tell you. So for example, I can see my name is wrapped in an H3. And I can see the color that I picked, the font that I picked, all kinds of things like that. So this might be helpful again when you're debugging of understanding like what are my images, what are they wrapped in, what's the margin around those. So this is an incredibly helpful tool as you're getting started debugging. And you can kind of look around here. These arrows drop down so that you can see your code. Okay, let's head back over to VS Code, get my live server up. next to it, my ideal workspace. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is modify this icon container. So if I come over here to my index.html, so some of you today are going to be saying like, wow, my icons are way too big. I do not need them to be that big. You want icons to be at least 60 pixels wide, and that's so that someone can touch onto it and get to it successfully. One thing that is in this code that you do need to change is line 26 and 32. There's just an extra closing quote, so you can clean those out too. Okay, so just want to do that while we were in here. Okay, so I can see on line 20, this is where my icon container starts. So I could even put a comment in here for myself, like where the icon container is located. And I could do a command backslash. That comments are so helpful when you're coding. Okay, so if I come over here to this div class icon container, now I know if I want to access this whole icon container, this thing that holds all of these social media icons, so pretty much everything, you know, here to here, all I have to do is call up my icon-container in CSS. So that's one of the things that's so wonderful about how class works. You kind of give something a class in here, and then later you can address it over here. So if I go to my icon container, let me take off that border line because I don't need a double border on that. That seems a little excessive. Okay, so the next thing that I'm going to do over here in order to make it smaller is I'm going to use my width feature, and I'm going to do width, and then I'm going to change that width. Right now it's at 100% width. I'm going to change it to 60%. See if that's maybe not the right live server. Hold on. Oh, I think my problem. Yes. So this is a great example of patience with yourself as you kind of debug and work through things, because that literally didn't work because I didn't do the semicolon at the end. So CSS is a very sensitive language. It needs its kind of particular things, and setting a width is definitely, and putting that semicolon at the end is the way to kind of finish off that command. So this can be a way today that you play with your sizing of those icons. 60% might be too small. I wonder if maybe like 70% might be better. Another thing people are trying to do all the time in this class is just simply center things. And the command for centering things, which, you know, sometimes you might run into bugs and it might not work. You might have to adjust things, but the way that it should work is margin 0 auto. So margin 0 auto basically puts margins of nothing top and bottom. It just kind of zeroes it out, and then it takes whatever's left over side to side and divides it in half. So you can see this is why I say, you know, it sometimes works for you, but sometimes can give you problems, because yes, it technically did center everything, but it looks like I must have a margin set here in this other container that it's part of, this art, science, and technology container, because I can see that not only is it centering, but then it's like moving it over a little bit. So this is one of the parts of code that just takes a lot of patience and kind of coming up with a system and knowing how to go back and check that system. So I can think, if I go back to this index.html, okay, so what else is this thing contained in? What is it wrapped in? What else is that icon container in? So I can come up here to my code and do a little bit of history, and see on line 16, when I click on that opening div, The thing that happens when I click on that opening div is that this bottom div becomes highlighted. And that's because all of these things are held together in another square. So in box model, you kind of have squares nested in squares, essentially. So now I can see if I want to get that additional little bit of margin out, I have to go into my secondary style, and I probably have a margin left. Yeah, I do. So see line 41, I have a margin left. So these margin lefts are kind of giving me problems today. And you might find this as you go through your code, that you have little kind of things that you have to go back and investigate and figure out why it's getting that information. So you can see when I turned off that margin left, now my icons do truly become centered, which is what I want. So that's great. Now my art, science, and technology is touching the edge. So I have to go in and figure out, okay, what's the class associated with that name? It is name. And now I can come back into my style.css and go to my name and do margin dash left 30 pixels. So that adjusted my top name. I meant to do it, oops, sorry, I did the wrong one. Secondary is the one I actually want to do. So let me turn that off. Oops, now I got two of them. Margin dash left. Okay, so now what I can do is come here to my border style dashed, and I can turn that off. And now I'm starting to see a more clear picture of how my business card is starting to form. I'm seeing that if I want to add space top and bottom, I can add margin top, margin left, kind of move this to where I want to place it. I'm going to have to put definitely some more margin top on my icons because I want them to be closer to the edge of my business card. So let's try doing that. So you can see it's starting to move down for me. Maybe I want to do more like 60, something like that. So this is where you're really going to start to understand what some of this text is wrapped in. And again, the main things that you're going to be moving around today are this name, secondary, and the icon container. You can also swap out this front side image for your own image. So the way that you do that is in this URL area on line 27. You can instead direct it to another image. So in this URL, I could start typing in assets and then do, say I want it to have that square background instead. To get rid of that extra. So this is where it's a very syntax specific language, meaning it needs the instructions a very certain way or else it's not going to work. So now that background image of the square is in there, you can see it's being repeated. That's because there is the default setting is to just display the image, and then if there's room to show it again, it will. If you go into your background image settings, there's ways to change this setting and modify it, Or the best way to do it, to be honest, is just to go into your index, your style.css, and get these exact pixel dimensions, so 390 by 220, and you can make your InDesign document or your Illustrator document have those same pixel dimensions. So that will make it so that it just kind of like locks in perfectly. Another thing you can do too, your business card might be oriented the other way. So you could swap these dimensions. So 220 by 390. So now my business card is going more this way, and you can see, now I'm going to have to change that percentages for the icon because now it's scaling way too much, because it's basically what that width 60% is doing is it's saying take the entire width of this card and scale this to be, whatever it was, 60%, 70% smaller. So I might not need that dimension now. So this is the part of each of your cards where you're really getting into troubleshooting and like having to go and make like slight modifications, or really spending time getting to know this code. So like, for example, if you don't like the class icon container, you just want to call this icon or something like that, you can change the names of these classes at any point, but just keep in mind that you have to change it two places. You have to change it here where you call out the class of that div, and then you also have to change it here where it speaks to it in CSS. So now that those two are back in dialog, it's going to work. I can turn off this width feature and see, where did it go? Totally disappeared. Okay, so maybe changing it to 90% is closer to what I want, but I'm going to definitely need a more significant margin on the top now that I've changed the orientation and the card has different proportions. So you can think of this, I don't know if any of you have done letterpress printing before, but to me, this process is very much like letterpress printing. It's kind of just like going in and moving stuff around and finding slightly different homes for where you want content to be.